A couple of months ago, I was intrigued about something going on in North Texas called the Rockwall. So I started looking at some things happening at U of H with some of the professors in the archaeology. Oh God, am I supposed to smile? In the archaeology and the astronomy and all that stuff out there, and that they were talking about new technology that they were using in South America. And they were finding things that they could not see from the air before. Consequently, they contacted someone in Rockwall, and they mentioned Rockwall. And I said, well, gosh, that's Texas. I'm going to check that out. I started looking for the Rockwall in Rockwall, Texas. And guess who popped up? A gentleman named Josh Reeves. I called him. Actually, I emailed him. We chatted a little bit. He agreed to come to Houston and to address us this afternoon. And since we're running so late, I'm not going to talk anymore, I promise. I'm just going to say, welcome, Josh Reeves, to Houston, Texas.
Thank you, Johnny. How's everybody doing today? All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. I want to thank Paranormal Planet, Houston, everybody, for having me out today. I'm going to talk about my little notes here, so I have to make sure I have my outline all set. But I want to talk first about how I got into all this and how I got into finding out about the Rockwall, and actually get into my whole history of how I got into research and all that all together, because it's very, very interesting and important to the story. When I started out researching, everybody always asks, when did you start researching all this? And they kind of laugh at me because the fact of the matter is I started researching this when I was in the 3rd grade. I started researching UFOs, Bermuda Triangle stuff. Later, when I got into high school, I was researching JFK and the Kennedy assassination and all sorts of conspiracies and stuff after that. And I, as an adult, just researched more and more and got into all these different topics. And growing up, I had a lot of different experiences that were really unexplained. Has anybody here ever had what they would call a paranormal experience or a UFO sighting or anything? Anybody? Everybody?
Oh, yeah.
Just about everybody here?
Yeah.
Okay, so you understand that. Well, that was my thing is, growing up, I grew up in Dallas and really around the suburbs. Rockwall's about 30 miles east of Dallas, and I grew up in a little town that was about 20 or 30 miles east, farther east of where Rockwall is. But I spent a lot of time around Rockwall as a kid, and I can remember when I was about 5 or 6, my grandparents used to have speedboats, and they used to take speedboats out on Lake Ray Hubbard, which is where part of the Rockwall is now submerged underneath the lake. And I remember being out on these speedboats with my grandfather, about 5 or 6, and I remember my grandfather saying, Josh, did you know when they built this lake, they didn't allow the construction workers to get their construction equipment, their diggers out of the lake before they filled up with water. They had to leave them down there, and it stayed down there to this day. And I don't know what made me remember that, but I'll tell you why it's important in a bit. And then fast forward into my teenage years, I had a missing time event real close to the Rockwall. A friend and I were going to work in Dallas. We left at noon, and when we got across the bridge, it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were just scared and confused and didn't know what was going on. So we called home. We said, what time did we leave for work today? And they were like, are you crazy? Are you on drugs? You left at 12 o'clock. And we were like, oh, what's going on with this? This is very strange. And then we had a couple of friends talk about the same thing. And then a few years later, we were out near the lake, and we were out just kind of hanging out late one night. And a friend and I got hit. It's the only way I can describe it, by some force, some energy force that literally knocked us out, made us black out, and really made us cry and emotional, and it just stuck with us. And we always wondered, if there was some sort of connection, because it always seemed to happen in and around the area of Rockwall. And another incident when me and the same friend were about 16 years old, we were in Greenville, Texas, which is about 30 miles east of Rockwall, and we saw a UFO that was heading towards Dallas, and we just got in the truck and just hauled and started following this thing. And we're following this thing and following this thing, and right when it gets to that same area of Rockwall where the bridge is, we see this beam just shoot up like this and then shoot back across the sky. And it was always something that really, what caused that? Well, in 2004, I was reading Jim Marr's book, Rule by Secrecy. And I got to the end of a chapter, and there's a chapter in there where he says, maybe one day we'll have answers to all the questions that we seek, such and such, this, that, and the other, in the ancient, mysterious Rockwall in Rockwall, Texas. And I said, wow, wait a minute, what's this? You know, this has got to be something connected to that. So immediately, as soon as I heard about it, even though I had no facts and I had no information to back up anything about it yet, I said, I just knew in my gut, this is connected to it, and I'm going to uncover this. And fast forward a few more years, 2007, I made my first film. It was on 9/11. It was called 9/11 New World Rising, and I started doing my radio show then. And after I started doing my radio show, I had every intention of wanting to make this Rockwall film and doing the Rockwall research, but I just wasn't there yet. So I started doing other films and other topics. And then about a year later, after starting my radio show, I met with some friends who I had told about the Rockwall, and they were very interested in it. They kind of took the ball and ran with it and set up this meeting with a guy named John Lindsay, who was one of the guys who did an archaeological dig at the site, part of the Rockwall, in 1999 and 2000. So I went to his house, met with him, and we spent about 2 hours at his house. He's talking to us, explaining. I'll talk more about him here in just a minute. But the Rockwall, this is actually a little effigy of the Rockwall that sits outside of the Rockwall Courthouse, the old Rockwall Courthouse in Rockwall. This was erected in 1976 for the state sesquicentennial of Texas, or bicentennial of Texas, and they had a excavation at the Rockwall dig during that time as well. What they did was they took a bunch of these stones, and they just, you see the stuff in between the rocks there. That's not the same mortar substance that we'll talk about here in a bit that was found in between the stones. But they took these stones and they just kind of threw them up there. And this is actually the only place where you can go now and see anything related to, well, the biggest question I always get concerning the Rockwall is, where can I go and see it? Where can I go and visit this thing? And the fact of the matter is you can't, because it's buried, of course, and we'll talk more about that here in just a second. So I just, at a very early age, felt like there was something big I was going to do in my life. I don't know what possessed me to think that. And then when I found out this little thing was erected 2 days before I was born, I was like, okay, well, that's it. But this guy right here is John Lindsay. And this is a picture from the 99-2000 excavation. When I met with John, he's an architect. He no longer lives in Rockwall. He was actually, ran out of town, for lack of a better description. He was ran out of town by locals because he discovered that a high-level Texas congressman had a 2.5-ton garnet stone with hieroglyphs, strange hieroglyphs. We'll show you pictures and talk about that more later in the presentation. And when he started asking around about it, they ran him out of town, and he's now basically in seclusion and in hiding out in West Texas. I hope to be able to interview him later for Volume 2 of the film. But when I met with him at his house, he spent about 2 hours telling us about the Rockwall and talking about it. He was sort of building it up. It was quite hilarious because we were already of the impression when we met with him that this was somehow connected to extraterrestrials or somehow connected to something. And he spent 2 hours trying to lead up to saying, okay, I think this is built by aliens or something. And I think he thought we weren't going to be on board with that. It was quite funny. And at the end, we said, you know what, you can just spill it. We're all quite on board with this here. But he had a lot of the examples of some of the materials that were found and some of the artifacts that were found. We have to see. We'll talk more about that here in just a few minutes. We can continue this. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the history of the wall itself. This is the town of Rockwall here, and that in the middle is the old courthouse. Now, it was built on top of what has been described as a dome rock lined temple wall. And this is where this is the courthouse again. This is where they built the original courthouse where they put the little effigy at. And back in the 40s, some guys went and did some exploring underneath there, and supposedly they found all kinds of jewels and gold and all sorts of things, but there were some sort of structural issues, so they never went back in there. And this, of course, is where the 2.5-ton garnet stone that was found near Rockwall was stored until it was severely whisked away in the night by a high-level, well-known Texas congressman. We'll talk more about that later. But the Rockwall was discovered in 1852. This is the oldest known photograph of the Rockwall. This was taken sometime very early in the advent of photography. This is one of the first views and pictures of it that were ever seen. When the town of Rockwall was first set up in the late 1800s, you had two gentlemen that came from, one that came from Virginia, one that came from Tennessee. It's very odd, both of these men were Freemasons, and there's really no indication as to why they decided to come to Rockwall, or what was so special about it that made them come and decide there. It seems to me, even though I can't prove this, that these gentlemen had some sort of advanced knowledge of what was there. So they come to Rockwall, they start getting the town set up. As at this point, the town doesn't have a name yet at all. It's just not called anything. About a year later or so, you started to have farming communities being set up. And when the farming communities started to get setting up, you had all these different farmers that were coming in. They were all arguing over who wanted to, who got naming rights of the town. This guy wanted to name it Johnsonville. This guy wanted to name it Wadeville. They were arguing and bickering over who was going to get naming rights of the town. As soon as they started trying to set up water wells and began digging for water, they started noticing peculiarly that all of them began to hit some kind of stone or rock when they would go down and dig these water wells. Now, geologically, there is no rock, no natural rock found in this area of North Texas at all whatsoever, zero. So it was very anomalous when they started finding these, what looked like masonry walls, when they were trying to build their water wells. So they went into town, they got the two gentlemen, the Freemasons, that set up the town, and they said, you know, can you come look at this? We don't know what this is. We need you to come examine it. So the two gentlemen came out. They walked right up to this exact spot here. They looked at it, and they said, boys, you know, you guys, none of you can name this after yourselves, because this proves beyond any shadow of doubt that there were people here before us. And this is where the real genesis of the idea of this not being a natural formation first came into play. The town itself is situated right directly on top of this wall. The wall is 20 miles in diameter, but it's 4 miles thick and 6 miles wide exactly on both sides. This was found on T.U. Wade's property. Mr. Wade was one of the original farmers that I mentioned that set up the town. He ended up utilizing this, obviously, as his water well, but the original intent of this was some sort of, they call this the watchtower. You can see it has some sort of window cut out in it. It has, this is the only known photograph, as far as I know, that there is of this. Many of the photographs I'm going to be showing you, they came from the original dig and also came from archives and whatnot. But this structure supposedly goes down, I don't know how, I mean, I'm sure it goes down the full length of the wall, which is roughly about 100 feet down to the bedrock. And supposedly this site, I'm hoping to be able to go get to see this site eventually because it's still there. And John Lindsay told me at one time that he knows where it's at and has gotten permission to go there. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do that eventually. This is what they call the arch. This arch was found on the site of the original Wade farm where that well was already found. It has some sort of strange skull or emblem. We don't know quite sure what that is yet. This property that this is located on, I've been there, but I haven't been able to see any of the wall because it's buried underneath. And every time anyone's ever excavated any of this stuff, going back to the 1940s, the State of Texas Historical Society always shows up and says, cover it up, cover it back up, structural danger, and they never really have a solid reason as to why, other than structural danger. And it's the same story that they've given every time there's been any sort of new archaeological digs. This is the same story that they give. So this is still there, and this is still in existence. This were at the same location they had, back in the 1940s, they had this little display set up, and you could, of course, go and pay. I don't quite know what the difference is between the admissions. They had a 15-cent admission and a 25-cent admission. I don't know whether you got to see deeper for 25 cents. I'm not really sure. But this is, the state of Texas actually eventually shut this down because they did not like the fact that the guy was, Mr. Boydston, who was doing this, was telling the people that this was the remnant of an ancient civilization. And they had a big, big problem with that because obviously that's something they didn't want people to know. And so you had several people come out and look at this in, I think we're going to have a picture of you in just a second here. There we go. This gentleman here is Count Byron de Prorock. He was sort of the Indiana Jones of his time, and sort of really the, somebody like me, kind of a conspiracy theorist type guy. He was really, really stirring the pot in established academia and established science at the time. He came to Rockwall in 1925 and looked at the Rockwall and just completely had a flip out because he said the only place he'd ever seen stones like the Rockwall stones was at the ancient Phoenician Canaanite city in North Africa called Carthage. So he went around after he came to Rockwall telling everybody that, hey, there's this, you're not going to believe this, there's this ancient civilization. It's out in the middle of nowhere in North Texas. He never got a chance to come back to Rockwall before he died, but within 2 years of de Prorock basically sending shockwaves through academia, the Smithsonian Institution sent 2 gentlemen out to examine the wall, and when they came out and examined the wall, they deemed the rock wall to be a natural formation. Now, the location in which they used to make this determination, we now know, because at the time they didn't have Landsat images, they didn't have any kind of general mapping. And a lot of this stuff, before I go any further, a lot of this stuff is detailed. I have a film that I made earlier this year, Lost Secrets of Ancient America, Volume 1, and it's almost 4 hours. We have it for sale back here. Today, I'm really going to be hitting the highlights. If you want to see more detailed information about this, definitely get a copy of the film if you haven't seen it, and you'll get a lot more, just a lot more deeper in the information. A lot of the stuff I can't really go as deep on today. But the Smithsonian Institution, the long and the short of it is, based their assumption that the rock wall was a natural formation, not on the wall itself, but on other natural formations that exist within the wall. And now we're able to go back and look at the mapping of where the Smithsonian did their analysis on, and you can see the perimeter of the wall itself, and then you see where the Smithsonian did their analysis, and it's in the middle of the wall. So by that fact, we know that this ruling by the Smithsonian in 1927 saying that this was a natural formation is null and void, because in 2013 we have all this advanced technology, and yet they've never attempted to change their standpoint on it. This was a dig that was conducted in the 1940s, and this was done by Mr. Sanders from Fort Worth, Texas, who, interestingly enough, we can't find any hide or hair of this guy, not any of his family or anything. We do have his photos from his dig given to the Rockwall Historical Society. Now, it's very interesting because the wall itself here, it goes down almost 100 feet down to the bedrock, but in some of the digs that were done in the 40s and in the 70s, 1976, they only went down maybe 9, 10 feet. And what they started discovering were these very large stones that were very close to the surface. And what began to be found is that the lower that they would go down in their excavation efforts, the larger and older that the stones would become. So the first initial analysis of the rock wall showed that they got various results that were being based on these much larger stones at the top. And Mr. Sanders, through his excavations, found all kinds of interesting stuff. Again, all these pictures here in this sequence are from Mr. Sanders' dig. He found these, there we go, we have more of the rock wall stones. He found all sorts of strange hieroglyphs and things of that nature that they could not match with anything else they'd ever found. And in particular, the main important thing that he found was, again, what they've now called the Sanders stone, This is supposedly showing some of the etchings, or inscriptions, and whatnot that Mr. Sanders found on some of the stones. But this this garnet, 2.5-ton garnet stone called the Sanders stone, with these strange hieroglyphs, we'll talk more about it here in the presentation as well. There's another close-up of some of these etchings and indentions that were in the wall itself. The Sanders stone was in the old Rockwall courthouse that I showed you earlier up until I think the 1980s. And back then, I can remember when I was a kid being out there, that old courthouse was the jail at the time. If you could go by there, I remember going by when I was a kid, you could see inmates out the top of the roof, hanging out at the top yelling. Well, those inmates saw this Texas congressman and 3 other men leaving out of the Rockwall courthouse at 3 a.m. carrying this big stone. Now, Dr. James Glenn, who was a local doctor in Rockwall, who was really the first guy who pioneered the research of trying to prove that this was a artificial construct, not a natural formation. He was a very respected local doctor, big in the community, and he also lived with many Native American tribes and had a real great understanding for a lot of the ancient stuff that they had built. In his writing here, this is called the Systematic Essay of Rock Walls in Rockwall, Texas. He says in this explicitly, in this write-up, that the existence of natural formations within the area does not preclude the fact that some of them may actually be man-made. And so that was one of the things I found, was that you had, depending on what area of this thing people have looked at, would really make the difference as far as what their opinion would be, whether or not it was real or artificial. Now, natural or artificial. This is some of the locations where outcroppings were found. And when we take these latitude and longitude lines, it's amazing, even though this was done in 1933, it's amazing how accurate they did it without computers or anything else. But you can take these latitude and longitude lines today, put them in Google Earth over an overlay of the rock wall map, and this is how we were able to find out conclusively that these locations, which the Smithsonian Institution based its assessment of a natural formation on, absolutely fall within the wall and not the wall structure itself. Now, all right, now here is the map. It's kind of cut off. But this is partially the map of the Rockwall. You can see here, some of these outcroppings here, you'll see these lines. Now these represent some of the different spots that were found, and some of them do appear to be natural. These thick lines itself are the actual wall, and you can see this in greater detail in the film. This is the site of the original John Lindsay dig they conducted in 1999-2000. And this whole structure, the interesting thing is Rockwall County is one of the richest counties in Texas, the second richest county in Texas. And it's also the smallest county. The county itself, Rockwall County, encompasses the entire area where this wall is found. And this map was created by John Lindsay over the course of 3 or 4 years. He went out, this was absolutely done by hand. How many of you came from out of town or out of state to come to this? Oh, wow. Okay. What state did you guys come from? Here in the middle. Oh, just out of town? Okay.
We're talking Galveston.
Okay, Galveston. So let's say, who came here from not Texas? Okay. So y'all came from Alabama, right? Well, y'all are from Alabama, so y'all know how it is. You don't go trespassing on people's property, right? You're going to get shot. Well, this gentleman, John Lindsay, obviously, I guess he just wanted to get the work done. For 3 years, he went trespassing on people's property, anything he could do with a stick and a rod by hand, and went out and walked every inch of this thing. He's a structural engineer, so he quite knew well how to do mapping. And he went out and found the different locations of this. And the location where they conducted the dig at in '99 was on private property. Now this was found in a ravine very close to the Rockwall. This was found by Dr. James Brin, who I just mentioned just a bit ago. This is actually a recreation of the artifact. They had taken the original that was found to some Mayan elders, and the Mayan elders knew exactly what it was, and they gave them this mold so they were able to create a new one. And the Mayans told them that this was a representation of their god Quetzalcoatl. This was found in a ravine just a few feet away from the Rockwall itself. Now, Dr. James Glenn's granddaughter now has actually contacted me and been in contact with me since the film has come out. She's very much behind what I'm doing. It's pretty awesome. But this was in 1976 when they created the little effigy there. This was a local dig that the city conducted, and it's very interesting because the location where this is at does not actually fall on the rock wall itself, but as you can see here, I mean, we have these giant stones. And these don't seem to have the geopolymer stuff. This we'll talk about in a bit. We're going to get into more about the makeup of the wall here in a little while. But again, this is real close to the surface. So what I started to find out was that we have different types of phenomena. We have some natural phenomena occurring in the area. We have some obviously not natural phenomena going on in the area. And we also have construction that was going on at different times, meaning some of the original foundation stones in the original building of the wall go back to a much earlier time than the stuff that is closer to the top, because you can tell it's made out of different materials. The stuff that's closer to the top of the ground is actually made out of different types of material than the materials that are found lower into the ground. So the whole point of that is any analysis or anything that you would do on the newer stones at the top is going to affect your dating, and it's going to show you that this stone would may be a lot newer than it actually is. And we don't have any pieces of the rock wall as of yet. We hope to once we're able to hopefully get a dig conducted. What I do have is a portion of the top part of the wall. Everyone feel free to, you can pass that around. You can see, take a look at it. You'll see little seashells and stuff in that, and I'll explain why that is in just a bit. That's some sort of primitive concrete that exists on the top of the wall, and it does none of the rest of the rock wall stones match that type of stuff once you get down deeper under the ground. So it's very interesting, but we'll get into some of the makeup and for a lot of stuff to go up in just a second. Let's just leave it past there for me. So this is the 99-2000 dig site. These are the pictures that came from John Lindsay. This is basically what, if you were standing and looking at the rock wall without it being dug up, if you want to go look at it, this is the top of it. So that piece that's going around essentially came from some of these top layers. And I've been able to find some of those out in the rock wall. Many of them are on private property, some of them are not. But yeah, this is what the original site looked like, I think after, this is either prior to the digging up or after. This is a great shot here. Recognize this guy, Christopher Dunn. He's a pyramid power plant. Yeah, that's him. That's John Lindsay in the middle. This is from the now, if you're familiar with the Giza power plant books and his work, which I think probably a lot of you are, then you're probably thinking right now, okay, well, obviously, if Christopher Dunn's there checking it out, there's obviously something that he thinks ties in with his work, otherwise he wouldn't be there. And again, we'll get into that here in just a bit. Now, when they started excavating this, a lot of very interesting things started to occur to them and started to be found with, especially the fact that between the bricks, you have this perfectly buttered mortar substance. And we'll get into more of that. This is a lot of the groundwater started seeping up after they were excavating and doing all this digging, and they were pumping the water out, and yet the groundwater was still coming up. They didn't know at the time exactly what was causing that, but we've since found out what it is, and it actually wasn't groundwater. This is a very interesting here, because this is another piece, and you'll see that this varies quite differently from some of these much bigger stones that we saw earlier. This looks like a completely different type of construction. So this is what I mentioned about later on, some of the top layer stuff. Someone had built onto it. This is some sort of window that was discovered that up to that point they didn't really know existed. Again, this is from the 99-2000 John Lindsay game. The composition of the rock wall itself is very interesting, and what they kept finding within the stones were these strange iron rings. And when these iron rings were taken out, these are found very, very close to the top. When these were taken out and examined and analyzed, they were found to be dated to 7,000 years. And they were smelted of iron, aluminum, copper, and tin. Now, tin, if you know anything about geology, tin has never been found remotely anywhere near the Americas at all, ever. So if there were any sort of tin naturally found here, it would be of huge interest to people who would want to mine it, but it's never been found anywhere else, only in these smelted rings that are found within the wall. And John Lindsay said that they looked like power plugs, as if you could plug something into the wall. That's what they looked like. Here's another one of them. And I held one of these in my hand. It's very strange thing. And when they started excavating the wall, they had set a bulldozer up on top of the structure, and the low-frequency vibrations from the digger caused the entire wall to start shaking and vibrating and producing all the sound and electrical current. And that's when they discovered that the wall itself has piezoelectrical properties to it. And John estimated that he believed that was what these iron rings were there for. They served the purpose of to conduct the energy, or to be able to get access to the energy that was produced by the piezoelectrical energy of this thing. Now, I mentioned earlier the story that my grandfather had told me, and I don't know why that story always stuck with me, but when I started researching the wall, I found the story that my grandfather had described to me, and it just was mind-blowing. What had happened when they were digging out Lake Ray Hubbard to be able to make the lake, they ended up burying a lot of the rock wall subsequently underneath it. But when they were digging out the lake, on the other side of where the rock wall is, they found these large domed rock structures that are described very similarly to what the old Rockwall courthouse was built on. And the caterpillar diggers cracked one of these and fell down into a deep, deep, deep cavern. And the gentleman who owned the digger had just bought this thing. It was brand new. And when he asked the construction crews and the people in charge to help him get it out, they said, no, we can't get it out. We can't retrieve it. We have to leave it down there. Very strange, very odd, almost as if they were scared of something. They were constructing this lake in the early 60s. In 1963, they were very behind schedule, about 2 years behind schedule, and I don't know if there's any real connection to this. A lot of people have speculated about it, but there has been speculation that when John Kennedy came to Dallas in November of 1963 to give a speech, he was actually going to go to the international trade market and deliver a speech about the existence of extraterrestrials and the extraterrestrial technology that was found near the rock wall. Now, whether that's true or not, there's not really any way for us to prove it, but what is interesting is that just a few months later, in March of 1964, 3 months or so, 4 months right after Kennedy's assassination. The 2-year behind project of the Rockwall, all of a sudden, of the Lake Ray Hubbard project, all of a sudden, boom, he gets killed, and all of a sudden they get ahead of schedule, and the lake gets rapidly filled up, and leaving, buried underneath it much of the rock wall and a lot of the stuff that's there. Now there isn't a big section of it that's under the wall, just the western side of it. But from what I understand, a lot of the more interesting things that had been found were found on the side that ended up going underneath the rock wall. These 2 stones are called the Hanby stones. These were found by Mr. Hanby, a local Freemason, who dug these out. They were used for foundation stones. Here you'll see these strange boreholes. Now these boreholes were not made by any modern equipment or anything else. This is how they were found. And these boreholes started to become something that I was seeing quite regularly in examining a bunch of the other different information. I'll get into more of that, because once I started looking at the rock wall, I also began to look at other sites around America and to see if there were any other anything else like this that had ever been found. So when I started out talking to John Lindsay in 2008, immediately I was like, okay, so here's what we know so far. Here's the stones. Here's this wall. Okay, now let's find out what this thing is made of. Now these stones, the Hanby stones, I'm not quite sure who has these stones now, but they're very interesting because supposedly, I don't think we have pictures of them. There were a few of them were found that had triangular formations in them, inscriptions. And John supposedly found the house that these were buried under and dug these out. And again, you find these boreholes. We find these boreholes also in some of the Rockwall stones. And I found some of them at other sites as well. We'll get into that here in just a bit. And this is the Hanby stones too. So I started trying to say, okay, here's this thing. Well, let's find out what it's made of. In the 1940s and in the 1950s, there was sample analysis done on the stones, and they determined that the rock wall was made up of 55% zircon, is the most abundant mineral. Zircon, garnet, tourmaline, starlite, rutile, titanite, brookite, and niobe. Now let me back up just a little bit. I'm kind of ahead of myself here. Back to that last picture. So here again, you'll see there's the borehole. This is one of the stones that's found outside of the Rockwall Courthouse. You can see this material here that lines it. That is the geopolymer mortar substance. This is a substance that was analyzed and found to be a very, very watertight, waterproof seal. When they built this, they didn't bother putting it back together the way it was found. They just blew it up, put some concrete on it, and stuck it there in front of the old courthouse. But there's a very expansive nature to this material. I'm probably getting ahead of myself here, but I'll go ahead and talk about it. We have to end up going to the slides and do that. I'm going to pass some of this stuff around for you guys to take a look at. This is, I'll start with these two. The small one here is zircon, and this big one here is garnet. Both of those are the two primary minerals that comprise the rock wall. Actually, calling it a rock wall is kind of a misnomer. It's actually not made out of rock at all. It's actually made out of the various different types of crystals. So we'll get more into that here in just a bit. So we have zircon, garnet. We have starlite, which is what this. Starlite is a very interesting mineral because it's the state mineral of Georgia. In Georgia, you have, of course, the city of Atlanta, which is supposedly where one of the capital cities of Atlantis was located. The national mineral of, or the state mineral of Georgia is starlite. Starlite is very interesting because it has these natural crosses that form in the stone. This one actually has what they call the Maltese cross pattern built into it. You can see that as well. Now, keep in mind that in these individual minerals, that's starlight. This is tourmaline. Now the tourmaline itself, and just like the starlight itself are these little gray impactions. The rest of this is the natural rock that it's found in. Same with this. You have the tourmaline here. The little green parts are the tourmaline itself. The white is the actual mother rock that it's found and located in. And the interesting thing is we don't find any of that material at all in the rock wall. This is rutile. Same thing here. The little brown spots that you see within the crystals, that is that's the rutile. Now, all of these specific minerals have their own set of geological processes that they form in. They all form within certain mother rocks that they're based in. In order to get those minerals out, you have to extract them. This is a great example of this. This is tourmaline, and it's on quartz. Tourmaline, absolutely geologically, can only form on quartz. If you're going to get tourmaline, you have to extract it from the quartz first, and then have just the tourmaline on its own. But the interesting thing in the rock wall, we don't have any of these rocks that they naturally form on. The geological processes of these stones have to have something to form on. In the rock wall, the individual minerals are taken, ground up, they're extracted, ground, and then cast into these stones that have a Mohs scale hardness of 8, a diamond being a 10, so it's very hard. You can pound on the rock wall stones for like an hour with a hammer and it'll never break anything off. We also have titanite and brookite, and you can examine the little, now it's very interesting, you look at that and you'll see the little shiny stuff on it. Again, that's the material. Keep that in mind. The material that you see that these little pieces are in is not the material that's ground up and put in the rock wall. The only parts that are ground up and put in the rock wall are the little bitty tiny things. And that's titanite and brookite there. And those are generally used to create alloys. We use them to create titanium, other things like that. And the last one, which was found in the Rockwall stones, is niobium. And to me, this is the most interesting one because niobium is only found in an element called columbite. There is no columbite present in the rock wall whatsoever. So we know that someone had to have extracted the niobium from columbite in order to be able to put it into the stones themselves. Now, we didn't know about columbite until we didn't know about niobium, rather, until about 200 years ago. We use niobium today to reinforce steel pipelines. We use it in jet engines, rocket engines. We use it in big hadron colliders like CERN, also in MRI machines, magnetic resonant imaging machines. I'm going to pass around this little baggie here. This baggie has a 1 gram bar of pure niobium in it. And you can pass this around. You can, give it the test. Give it the stress test when it gets to you. See how tough this stuff is. It's a great conductor as well. If you were going to produce some sort of device that was going to produce lots of electrical energy and you needed to make sure that the heat and the temperature were brought down, this would be the perfect thing that you would want to use. So again, the fact that we don't have any columbite in the rock wall, but yet we have niobium there shows you that someone, whoever created this thing, had a high level degree of sophistication of engineering. The other interesting thing about the engineering of the rock wall, well, besides the makeup of the stone itself, is the fact that it was the entire structure, the entire 20-mile diameter structure, is leveled at 550 feet above sea level. Meaning no matter how much the terrain changes on this thing, the whole thing stays level at 550 feet above sea level. The walls are also found to have a buttress effect. Now, buttressing is something that structural engineers use to be able to have a structure that will contain the weight of a heavy object on top of it for sustained periods of time. Buttressing is not something that can happen naturally. It's not a natural geological process that happens at all. I don't know why that's blurry. That's what we do. Maybe it's a low resolution photo. So the fact that you have buttressing in this thing to withstand live loads tells us that it seems somebody constructed this thing with the intent of being able to have something very heavy on top of it. So you can imagine, as I told you earlier, starting out being someone who's into UFOs, you can imagine where my brain was going at this point. I'm thinking, big giant structure, supports high weight loads for sustained periods of time, and also produces energy. Like, this thing sounds like some kind of launching pad. But we can also tell that it was produced and used for some sort of a dwelling. Now, this gentleman, Dr. Wolf Goss, from the University of Texas, came in 1999 and conducted, these are actual photos, the only existing photos there are, of him conducting his paleomagnetic survey on the Rockwall. Now, magnetic field strength is measured in Gausses. The planet Earth has a magnetic Gauss signature of half a Gauss. The rock wall has a magnetic field strength of 40 Gauss. Again, the entire planet Earth has a Gauss of half a Gauss. This rock wall has a magnetic rating that is greater than the entire planet Earth. Now, Wolf Goss, who you saw there conducting that survey, he will not allow his findings that he discovered there to be put out until after his death. Whatever he found scared him so bad that he is afraid that if he talks about it, he'll risk his entire academic career even bringing it up. So we've actually been able to piece together, from talking to John Lindsay, I've been able to figure out exactly what it was that he found. And apparently what scared him so bad was the fact that whenever this thing was built, it's so old that the magnetic field of the Earth during that time was completely different than what ours is now. A lot of this stuff, like the analysis of the wall, the makeup, the digger shaking, paleomagnetic survey, you know, in 99, 2000, they had video cameras. They had still cameras. It's baffled me as to why no one really documented this properly. So that's been part of what my goal is with this film series, and of course doing this talk, is trying to be able to conduct my own dig at the Rockwall and to document all of the findings properly and then present them in the film to the public. Because, you know, you can tell people something all day long, but unless you show them the facts and show them the data, it's never going to change the public opinion. And I think there was just a sloppy job done originally on this. So that's part of my goal, is to be able to conduct a new dig at this thing and really try to document a lot better than what happened the first time exactly what we're dealing with here. This is part of the 90-degree angle. This is another part of the wall here. A 90-degree angle was found right in this same area. We know any sort of straight lines in nature are never natural. Nature doesn't create anything in straight lines. Part of this wall started to collapse. Here's some of the, kind of got ahead of myself, so we're going to have to kind of sit through the stones. But again, these are some of the materials that are going around to you guys. Now, these minerals, zircon, garnet, starlight, titanite, brookite, rutile, none of these exist naturally in the area of North Texas, or in Rockwall for that matter. And some of these minerals are not even found within thousands of miles. And in fact, starlight, the one that's going around that has the cross in it, the only close place, I think the only real place in the United States that's been found is Georgia. That's some of the other zircon type materials. So whoever created this had to extract all of these individual minerals that you see going around out of the mother stones they're located in, mix them together into some mixture. Then, by a process completely unknown to us or completely unknown to science, they were able to somehow get the individual minerals. They kept their molecular structures from bonding within the stones. We have no idea how to do that today. Normally, when you take any of these kind of minerals and mix them together, they're all going to blend. Molecular structures are all going to blend in together and become one cohesive thing. The Rockwall is not like that. Each one of these individual minerals, and mind you, they are ground up microscopic. So as you're seeing the examples that are going around, you see the mother stone that's located. Again, this stuff was flaked off of this part of the rock, and then that was the material that they used itself to create the stone. So my question was, what happened to all the quartz? What happened to all the mother stone? They would have had to have had literally tons of this extraneous material and had nothing, nothing to do with it, especially when you're talking about tourmaline, which only forms in quartz. Many of those rocks that are going around only form in quartz. So that was really my question. Where did all this quartz go? And then when I found out about the mortar substance, which is made out of 3 different types of crystals, quartz crystals that have been brought together from various locations and then combined to create, there's niobium, to create this, what has been termed a geopolymer mortar substance. And that was what was baffling to me at first, was the fact that you had all of this different types of crystal making up this geopolymer mortar substance. You had, here it is, again, here's the geopolymer here, we can get a better look at it. This stuff expands when it's exposed to air. This is made up of different types of quartz that are not found around any of the areas where the Rockwall is found. So the geopolymer mortar substance really is a game changer because, again, it's something that's never been found naturally. I recently found out that the Bosnian pyramid analysis that came back said that the concrete there is also made of some geopolymer mortar substance. Well, I fail to think that's a coincidence. That's something we're definitely going to have to put together. I'm hoping to, once we get a rock wall dig conducted, get some of the materials from the rock wall and have them lab analyzed with some of the material that's been found at the Bosnian pyramids. So, once I had established that we were absolutely dealing with some sort of artificial construct, I started to look around and see if I could find, and this took several years. I mean, I really didn't know where to start. But I started saying, okay, well, if these guys were builders, builders have to have material. If you set out to build a house, if you set out to build a building, concrete, or anything, I guess it's easy for us. We just run down to Home Depot and get it, right? But back then, or whenever this was, presumably, from the analysis and the soil analysis and rock analysis we'll talk more about later, thousands of years old, you would have had to have had a massive effort to gather all of this stuff. So I started to consider, all right, well, whoever built this had to have gotten the materials from somewhere. It should be possible for us to find the location where these materials came from. So for several years, I was really kind of stuck there. And I was looking at different things. And I don't even know, honestly, a lot of this stuff has really fallen in my lap. I don't really honestly know what led me to finding this. I was looking at the types of stones that are in the rock wall and trying to see if any of that stuff was found at all in, let's just say, Texas. I mean, we could have looked around, all around the United States. Some of the stuff like tourmaline is only found in 2 places in the United States. Found in California. Some of it's been found, I think, in 1 other state, but a little bit in Texas. This is the only existing photograph of a site called Behringer Hill. And Behringer Hill it's once again, just like the rock wall, and this is a trend that I found a lot in my research. Just exactly like the rock wall, Behringer Hill is now buried under a lake. It was buried under the damming of Lake Buchanan in central Texas in 1933. Behringer Hill has been described by the U.S. Geological Survey as being the world's largest cache of rare earth metals and other minerals. So I said, okay, let me look and see if some of this stuff was found. Lo and behold, every single mineral that is found within the rock wall can be found here. And growing up in Texas, being from Texas my whole life, and especially going down to Central Texas a lot through the years, I found it really unbelievable at first that I'd never heard of this area that they call the Llano Uplift. And the Llano Uplift is located right near, it's about 20 miles or so from Lake Buchanan. And Behringer Hill, back when this was first discovered, they discovered some sort of ancient mining quarrying operation. You can kind of see it here in the picture. It's not a very good picture because it's the only picture that exists and it's very old. But you can kind of see there are like pits and chunks of it. They found someone way back in antiquity had been pulling out mass amounts of stone and rock out of this place thousands of years prior to modern humans going and discovering it. And some of the elements that were found here at Behringer Hill have only been located anywhere else in the world here. They've only been located here. You have gadolinite. Now, little warning here. The other ones I could pass around. Some of these I can't pass around. 3 of these specifically I can't pass around. Gadolinite, which is partly what this is made out of. This one I can pass around. Just don't take it out of the container. Leave it in the plastic container. You can pass that one around. Gadolinite is mostly what this is made of. Gadolinite is a radioactive isotope. You're not in any danger by holding that. It's sealed, and it's really low level. But some of these that are found, this is a stone from there. This is several different ones put together. This is feldspar, danbarite, biotite mica, and carnonite. This looks very similar to some of the type of stuff found in the Rockwall. This comes from Lake Buchanan, Behringer Hill. A lot of these are radioactive. They pulled out a ton of uranium from a mine near Behringer Hill, which went on to be the uranium that was used in the Fat Man and Little Boy atomic experiments and the nuclear weapons. There's a material also found in this area near Llano, Texas, where the lake is, called lawnite. Lawnite, I mean, this is just, let me stop. This is an unbelievable, I've been down there about 5 or 6 times now, and I want to go back again. If you ever get a chance to go down there and just check it out, if you're a rock hound, if you're somebody that's into minerals and stuff, it's an absolute field day down there. I mean, you'd have to have a dump truck to be able to carry back with you all of the minerals that are just lying around on the ground out there. But specifically, you have a mineral called lawnite, and this is a type of granite that has blue crystals formed in it that they have no scientific explanation for. They have no scientific explanation how the blue quartz formed in that stone, and the only place it was ever found at is right there in Llano, Texas. We have some for sale over here at our little merch booth if you guys would like to get some of that. It's the only place in the world you can get it is there. This is an example of some of the standard granite that's found in the area. Most of the granite in Texas, the pink granite, stuff you see in courthouses, buildings, comes from this location. Now, Smithsonite, what was some of those? Was it Smithsonite, Fergusonite? There are monofergusonite, gumite. Several of the elements that were found here had high interest to people like the Nernst Lamp Company, Westinghouse. You had a lot of people who at that time were just starting to make the first light bulbs, and they were constantly looking for filaments that would provide something that would work for their light bulb. So you had several people come and acquire the wall. It was later acquired by, oh gosh, here we go. Here's my first one of the day. I'm terrible with names. I said Westinghouse, there's another. Can't remember. Oh, Edison, Thomas Edison, yes. They acquired Behringer Hill because they wanted to make their light bulbs out of it. And then shortly after, within a few months after they acquired it, was when he started to have the dam building project that occurred there. And this was summarily, for whatever reason, covered up, drowned out, and buried underneath the lake of Lake Buchanan. Now you can still, on occasion, see this part of it in the film. We have footage of, this is the dam area where Behringer Hill is located. And they had a drought for about 6 years out there. And when we went out there to film, the day we went out to film, the drought broke the day we got there. So, you can imagine my feeling. We were sitting there going, oh man, this is the luck. And then 6 years of no rain. This is actually what's interesting here. This is across from where Behringer Hill is for the dam. And this grass and stuff that you see here was actually, I mean, the water used to come up well past this. It's been so drained and so dried out that much of the lake is just, I mean, it's completely dried up. But that was one of the interesting things I started to discover when I went out to get some footage of this. I said, okay, well, supposedly you can see part of Behringer Hill, so I'm going to get footage of what you can. We went out there several times. First time it got rained out. Second time we went back, it was a nice day. I get out there and, you know, it's kind of out in the country. It's kind of rural, but I mean, there's deer everywhere out there. You can't drive 2 feet without seeing deer just right in front of you. We were driving around out here all day trying to find this dam, the Buchanan Dam, because when the Buchanan Dam was built in the 1930s by the Lower Colorado River Authority, you had, Behringer Hill was the first thing that was submerged under the lake when they dammed this up. And there's pictures online on the internet of people standing up here on top of the dam. There's pictures of people fishing off the dam and everything else, and they look like pretty recent pictures to me. So we drove around out there for just hours and just felt completely like we were just, we're not this dumb, huh? How come we can't find this thing? There should be signs. So finally I went to the little office there and said, can you tell me how you get to the dam? How do you get up to this thing? And the lady says, oh, you can't get up to it. And I said, you can't? How come it doesn't say anything about that online? She didn't answer me. And she said, well, a few years ago, the Department of Homeland Security came out and took it over. Took over the Buchanan Dam, shut off all access to it, and if you go out to the road where you can drive, where we used to could drive up to it and walk up to it now, they've got it blocked off, Department of Homeland Security signs, and they've got a nest of cameras all outside of this thing. So to me, that seemed particularly odd and really made me even more interested. It's, okay, what's going on here? Obviously, there's some reason. The drought coinciding with the reappearance of Behringer Hill, and then all of a sudden this blocking off of the dam by Homeland Security really sent off red flags for me. So I kind of went home feeling defeated with my tail between my legs. Just thinking, oh, man, I'm not going to be able to do anything on this. So I get home and I start researching and looking up this Homeland Security thing. Because obviously I wanted to find out why they took it over, why they're now restricted access to the public to the dam. I mean, these are public works. Tax dollars pay for this. We should be able to access this. And if we're not able to access to this, they should give us good reason. The amazing thing, if you go look online, you can't find nary a mention as to why this has been shut down. There's a very, very big veil of secrecy surrounding the reason as to why they have now restricted access. Usually it's terrorism or something like that. They did not cite terrorism as the reason why they closed off access to this dam. So that set red flags up to me. So the next time we went out, and you'll see a lot of this in the film, the next time we went out, we found the location from the picture you saw previously in this one, where you could see perfectly across the water to where the dam is. We're basically on the other side of there. So we set the cameras up on the other side and opened the zooms up wide as full as they would go. This is a shot close to the side of the dam. Now you'll see right below where this is, and it's completely dry. There was water there before. So we were trying to figure out, okay, what's going on over there? And what we discovered was there were all sorts of diggers, cranes. You can see a little bit of this here in the background. There's all sorts of construction equipment going on over there. So I went to look it up and looked up to see if they were doing any sort of dam refurbishments and whatnot. And come to find out, when this dam was constructed, it was over-engineered. It was built with an engineering prowess to such a degree there was no reason for them to do any refurbishments. And so that got me on to looking at the extensive mineralogy of this area. This is another location that we found not too far from there, and you see here another perfect example. There's the boreholes, yet again. And this just, I can't tell you how I felt when I saw this. I saw the boreholes, I went, my goodness gracious, there it is again. Just like we saw in Rockwall, just like we saw in the Hanby Stones. And these, for all the people I've talked to, these were not done with any recent equipment or done with new things. These boreholes were existing there when they found it. And so going down there to the area of Lake Buchanan was very fascinating, and talking to people, because a lot of people use the area as vacation homes. They have second homes there. They go there for the summer. But their tourism has been slowly declining over the past 5 or 6 years due to the massive drought going on down there. And there are some locals that live around the lake year-round. And I started, after talking to people and reading some different articles, found that there are massive amounts of strange, multiple cancer victims going on in the area. People are dying of not one cancer, they're dying of 3, 4 different types of cancer, thinking lung cancer, kidney cancer. And the reason that is, when they constructed Lake Buchanan, there was a big cavern underneath Behringer Hill that I showed you earlier. And this was filled up, the lake was filled up way ahead of schedule. They had a huge streak of rain when the lake was constructed, so it got filled up a lot quicker than they had planned. So they were not able to go in and seal this cavern that contained uranium, some of the different radioactive isotopes that are found there that Westinghouse was interested in. But because the water table has been up high to a high level all these years, there hasn't been a problem. But ever since the water table has been declining, every year as the water table at Lake Buchanan gets lower, cancer rates increase. But yet, most of the people around the area don't know why. There absolutely is some sort of effort going on in secret to access these minerals at Behringer Hill. Now, the reason they have to do it in secret is this. The EPA has very strict regulations on the mining of rare earth metals. China has had the stranglehold on rare earth metals. It still does up to this day. They had so many that they basically priced American mines out of the business 50, 60 years ago. There are a lot of rare earth metal mines in the country now that are starting to reopen and may reopen. And what I hear, the EPA may start deregulating this over the next 4 or 5 years. So, hey, I don't get financial advice out too often, but rare earth metals, it's definitely something you might want to put your money in, because when the EPA deregulates these, it's going to be a huge boom. China has the Hawaii Corporation, which Governor Perry allowed to come to Plano, Texas, and set up their world headquarters. Hawaii is the world's largest gobbler of rare earth metals. They also, China is also the world's leading experts, and they lead the world in weather modification technology, cloud seeding, chemtrails, and that's something that we saw quite a bit of. So it appears that there is some sort of unnatural drought going on in this area that is designed to bring the water table down to give re-access to these rare earth metals. And it's just unbelievable to me that it's being kept a secret so that foreign interests can exploit this and use it for their gain to keep charging Americans more money for something that exists in our land. I mean, it's just, and again, that was something that I didn't really count on when I got into this. I had sort of researched that end of stuff for years. But when I got into researching the Rockwall, I never dreamed that there would be so many. There's yet again another borehole there found in the stones. This was found about a mile from Behringer Hill. I just never dreamed there'd be so much subterfuge and secrecy and cover-ups and this stuff. And boy, Heidi, I tell you what, there is quite a bit of it. This is some of they call this stuff black ugly. If you saw this on the ground, you probably wouldn't think anything of it, but actually that black ugly stuff is yttrium, which is another radioactive isotope. I mean, the mineralogy that's found here in this area is just unbelievable. They call it an uplift, but it's technically not an uplift, because uplifts generally happen over hundreds and hundreds of square miles. Here in Llano, it's a very small, locally contained thing. And after talking to some of the locals, The locals even told me, yeah, nobody here believes, that's the line we have passing around there. The locals said, yeah, we don't believe it was formed from that. I said, well, what do you think it is? And they said, well, we think it's an asteroid or a meteorite structure. But from looking at it, that's what I think as well. I think that might have something to do with a lot of the formations. Well, this is gadolinite. That's another one of the big chunks that was found there. So after going to Llano and going to the Behringer Hill site and getting some minerals, I said, okay, this looks like this might very well be our quarry. This is a site that I found right near there. I call this the Lion Rock. When you're standing in front of it, it looks very much like a lion. This is just kind of an outlying area. A lot of these stones appear to be stacked there by somebody. So after getting some of the minerals and rocks home, I started going back to what we talked about earlier with the magnetic Gauss signature of the rock wall stones being 40 Gauss. And after I took a magnometer to some of the Lake Buchanan minerals, I started to get Gauss ratings that were right around 42 to 43. Now that's unbelievable, and that to me started to tell me very quickly that the distinct possibility that these minerals were mined in this area for the rock wall was pretty distinct, but this is not conclusive yet because the methods I was using for it were less than professional, but we'll have to see. This is some of the areas that were flooded during the original construction of Lake Buchanan. After the drought happened, a lot of these headstones, all this stuff began to be exposed. So now this, people will ask me, okay, well, have we found anything else, any of these other rock walls? Has there ever been anything else like this rock wall found anywhere else? And the answer to that, for the most part, is no, absolutely not. Now, that's what's interesting. Even the scientific community that claims that it's a natural formation, they'll say, yes, it's a natural formation, nothing to see here, move along. And then in the same breath, they'll say, yes, but we've never found anything else like it anywhere else on Earth. We've never found anything that's ever formed of the same geological processes. But I started looking around to say, okay, has there ever been anything else found like this? And I found newspaper reports, 1873, and I think it was one. I think that was, the LA Times, the late 1800s. And then in 1920, an article was ran in the New York Times about it. Milano, Texas is a town that's about 100 miles from the Llano Uplift Lake Buchanan area. In fact, if you look at it on a map, and say that Llano's here, you can look at it on the map, and directly in a straight line across from Llano is a town called Milano, Texas. Now, according to these news reports, and according to the woman who made these news reports, they found in Milano, Texas, another 20-mile diameter wall in the late 1800s that was as thick as the Great Wall of China. You can see this here, it'll say, almost as something as the Chinese wall. 20-mile diameter structure, much thicker than the rock wall in Rockwall. And what they also found up on a hill was a megalithic temple that contained idol worship and all of these different Canaanite and Phoenician type of materials. Now, what struck me as completely 100% connection to the rock wall was this. Again, the straight line directly across from the location where the quarry is of the rock wall minerals all the way directly to Milano where this was found. They found evidence, this is the picture of the old town of Milano, they found evidence of iron smelting and metal smelting furnaces that were thousands of years old in the area. Someone was processing minerals at the site of this second 20-mile diameter wall. And as I was looking on the map again, I was just blown away because I'd been out there so many times out to Milano and didn't realize that I had heard about the Milano wall, but I did not realize at the time that it was a direct shot on the same highway just right across from where I had already been going. So I was like, damn, I missed that one. But when I looked at the map and located where Milano was, I said, oh, this can't be. Because at the time, whenever that was happening, there weren't roads, there weren't highways, and all that stuff constructible. But you have a direct east to west line from Milano to Milano, and then you have a direct straight line. You can go on Google Earth and go to Milano, Texas, and take the little line app thing they have on there on Google Earth and draw a direct northern straight line. If you went to Milano, Texas, where this wall was at, and walked due north, you would eventually wind up smack dab in Rockwall. So I don't know if anything else has been found on this wall. I can't find anything past 1920 in any kind of a mention, but it's on my list of something I'm definitely going to go out and check again. This is part of another strange wall that was found in Alabama. The Alabama folks back there. This was found in northern Alabama, runs underneath the Tennessee River. And one of the interesting things that really correlated to the rock wall for me with this was the fact that you have this strange hieroglyphic writing, which seemed very similar to some of the hieroglyphs that were found on the Sanderstone in Rockwall. And this wall apparently seemed to have all this ancient graffiti and whatnot on it, but there's never been anything else that's ever been found, as far as I know. No excavations, no anything else. These apparently were just covered up and completely never seen or heard from again. Sorry, I'm checking my timeline here. I have a picture. I thought I had a picture of the Sanderson. I think I do, but it's going to be later on. So once it established that we were absolutely dealing with an artificial construct, once I had established that we were dealing with sophisticated engineering, the next question came to be, who built it? Obviously, that's the question everybody wants to know. Who built this thing? Who were they? And fact of the matter is, we don't know conclusively, but we may never know conclusively, but we do have a pretty good idea. So I started examining more of the news reports that had come out of Rockwall, and some of the original news reports that first started coming out right after the Rockwall were found started describing the bones and skeletons of giants that were found near Rockwall, specifically one location where they found what was described as the abode of a giant. They found a large bedstand, large shoes, a pot that had human bones in it, indicating that this giant, whoever he was a cannibal. And they actually inferred in this I think it was late 1800s, the exact dates of the film, they actually related the building of this rock wall to this giant. So that was really my first, when I first started looking at it, that was my genesis point. That was where I said, okay, that seems somewhat plausible considering the engineering that went into this, but it also seems somewhat implausible because this giant abode that they had described really sounded quite savage and quite primitive. It didn't sound like someone who was necessarily going to be doing the engineering feats that were found in the rock wall. So after hearing a lot of people dismiss these initial giant reports, the more I heard them dismissed, the more I wanted to dig into them. So I found out that after the Rockwall Success newspaper ran these two stories describing this abode of a giant and describing this giant skeleton that had been found, the Rockwall newspaper was bought out, immediately summarily shut down, and no other articles ever appeared about it. They actually have the skeleton in a local feed store where you could go and visit it during that time, but it was later taken by the Smithsonian and never seen again. So I said, okay, all right, well, let's start there. I'm looking at this from, I'm a researcher, I'm an investigator. I try to look at every angle and try to who, where, how, what, why, when, the whole standard thing. And so I started looking into, okay, well, let's get to the bottom of this giant thing. Let's find out if anything else has been found. And John Lindsay and some of the other Rockwall researchers that I talked to, everyone sort of poo-pooed the idea of the giant thing. They said, oh, it's just a tall tale, and it's just, they were just having fun in the newspaper back then, and they put all these yarns in there, and he said the way you can tell that that's the case is because the gentleman who wrote these articles in the Rockwall newspaper assigned them Sam Slick. And Sam Slick was the name of a Canadian satirical writer who used to write stories in Canadian newspapers and have books printed in America. And that was how they always dismissed the giant connection with Rockwall. It was always under the guise of, okay, this is, just tall tales. And that was it. And when I started digging into it, just something didn't seem right about it to me. And lo and behold, I found out that Sam Slick, whose real name was Thomas Chandler Halliburton, actually died, I think, almost 10 years prior to the articles in the Rockwall Success newspaper about the giants being found. He was dead. There was no possible way, unless he's dealing with some serious magic that we're not aware of yet, that he was able to write these satirical tall tales of giants 10 years after being dead. So that immediately for me said, okay, there's got to be something to this. So I started going through news archives, going through old newspaper clippings, library stuff, going back to the 1700s, and it was mind-blowing. I, prior to this, had heard of the giants being found, giant skeletons being found. A lot of people always ask me about it on my radio show and stuff. And to be honest, I didn't really ever think there was anything to it. I thought it was a bunch of bullcrap. I didn't really buy into it. I was like, eh. Because a lot of the pictures and stuff that you see online are faked. A lot of the giant pictures, for whatever reason, what tactical advantage would there be, you would think, on the surface, to faking pictures of giants? What would somebody benefit from it? Well, what they would benefit from it is to, again, propagate the idea that I bought into, and a lot of people bought into, that the whole giant myth was just exactly that, a myth. So as I began to dig through the old newspaper clippings when I was making Volume 1 of this film, this is what I was blown away by. I mean, just newspaper report after newspaper report in almost every state in the Union, lots in Texas, Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, Ohio, New York, I mean, everywhere. We just had news report after news report of not only giant skeletons being found, but giant graveyards being found, especially here in Ohio. And so I said, okay, I had heard that there were 13 mound sites, ancient mounds, somewhere around the Rockwall area, but have not really been able to locate any of them because they're not marked or really noted or anything. And I was astonished to find that most of these large skeletons, 8, 9 foot, 10 foot, 12 foot in some cases, were always found in or near these mounds. And one of the things they would also find in a lot of these mound sites when they were digging them up, they would find stones, they would find minerals, they would find artifacts and other things that were made out of materials that are not found anywhere near where a lot of these giant skeletons were found out. And that to me, just immediately said, okay, there's definitely got to be something to this. And so I started studying into the giant thing. We talked about that more in the film. And I was shocked to find out that we kept seeing reports of some of these giant skeletons being found. Some of them that had black hair attached to the skull still, but a lot of them had red hair. And a lot of the reports from Native Americans, they have an extensive tradition of this war that occurred between the various races of these giants. One that were called they were the Ranawatta-Watonka, that's a huge word. The Ranawatta-Watonka were a tribe of giants that supposedly seeded the Native American tribes, gave them culture, gave them religion. But there was also this cannibalistic dark-haired variety that they described, which fit the description of the giant that was found in the Rockwall tomb near the Rockwall, because of the pot of bones and all that stuff obviously was there. So I was completely unaware that we had, and again, blown away to find out, just like with the Rockwall, we had not one, but two different types of phenomenon. Here we have two different types of giants that were found. The benevolent red-haired giants, who seem to be very friendly with the Native Americans. And then we have the cannibalistic dark-haired variety. And at some point there was a war. And many Native American traditions describe this war. The Mormon religion talks about this war between the Nephites and the what was the other one? Nephites and the other word. Anybody remember the other two? Yeah, they explicitly talk about it. Here's some of the other skeletons that were found. I think these might have been found in Florida or somewhere else like that. So I immediately started saying, okay, is there any connection to the Rockwall and these giants? And considering that a lot of these giant skeletons were found near ancient megalithic buildings, we started to see a pattern. Now, we know that Native Americans were here for thousands of years, but something happened. Something happened in this country, and I can't quite put my finger on it. But for all intents and purposes, it does appear that it was some sort of arrival. This is giant skeletons that were found in Victoria, Texas, 40,000 plus years old. That's the thing, some of the dating on some of these skeletons is just off the charts. Some of the ones that were found here in Victoria, 40,000 plus years old. Some of the ones that were found in Ohio, places like that, not quite that old. Some of them are only a few hundred years old. So it appears that we have a very large expanse of time in which these giants were here. But something happened in this country between the period of 800 and 1400 AD. You went from having virtually no megalithic sites, no mounds, no real structures or anything to speak of. The indigenous tribes really having no reason to build any of this stuff. And then all of a sudden, from East Coast to West Coast to Midwest, there was a gigantic explosion during the period of 800 AD to 1400 AD of these buildings. And just as quickly as they appeared, they disappeared. And some of the populations, one site in particular that we went to and filmed for Lost Secrets of Ancient America Part 2, I think we've got some pictures coming up later here, was Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. And it was a very interesting site because it was built over 12 generations by the Chacoan people who had absolutely no knowledge or use for the sophisticated astronomical alignments that are embedded within Chaco Canyon. If you've never been there, if you ever get a chance to go, you should definitely go. It really just changed me just going there. Because you definitely see that whoever constructed this had a high level of sophistication and knowledge of astronomy, a very, very strong interest in astronomical alignments such as the equinoxes, the solstices. I traveled to Moundville in Alabama, and Moundville in Alabama and Chaco Canyon, which is in New Mexico, are very similar in the fact that they have the same astronomical alignments. Alignments to Thuban, alignments to Sirius, alignments to Cygnus. Both Chaco Canyon and Moundville have alignments to Cygnus. That thing you saw right there was an artifact that was found that showed a Native American holding a giant tail. This is Moundville in Alabama. The people that constructed this site, you can see the little people here. They'll give you a size scale as to how big that thing is. It's just a massive, massive site. Now, some of the reports from Lewis and Clark from their expedition, Meriwether Lewis reported that some of these mound sites, when they went to them, they would find, when they got to these locations, the biggest mound on the site would generally be the home mound of the head of the tribe. And when they would go up to the top of the biggest mounds, they would always find an individual of large stature 10 to 12 feet tall, who was the chief, sitting on top of one of these locations. Moundville was built by the local people who we don't really know much about, because they spent 300 years constructing this site and then disappeared, completely without a trace, disappeared off the face of the planet. The alignments that correspond to this site, they're aligned to, again, solstices, the equinoxes, but it's also aligned to this, what they call the eye and the hand portal that's located in the Deneb star system. And there's exact alignments here from Moundville that line up with that. Moundville is subsequently also on the 33rd degree parallel line, and same as Rockwall, same as Dallas, both on the 33rd degree parallel line. Great Pyramid is the 33rd degree parallel line. And just like at Moundville, in Chaco Canyon, you had people who labored for literally hundreds of years building these structures, putting in them sophisticated astronomical alignments to which they had no knowledge or use for. In fact, if you go to Chaco Canyon, they'll tell you at their little gift shop there that the Chacoan people were an agrarian society who had no knowledge or use for any of the sophisticated astronomical alignments that are encoded in Chaco Canyon. I mean, you have, a lot of sites have alignments of the sun, solstices, and the equinoxes. Some of them have lunar alignments. At Chaco Canyon, you have both. You have lunar alignments and solar alignments. And there are lunar alignments at Chaco Canyon that are built into the buildings that sometimes only occur over the course of 10, 20, 30 years. Meaning someone would have had to have lived out at Chaco Canyon for 30 or 40 years prior to any structures being built there. And that makes it very more interesting. So you had over 300,000 artifacts excavated from here, Moundville, by the Smithsonian Institution. If you go to the Moundville Museum today, like I did, you can see maybe 4 or 5 real actual artifacts that came from this place. Over 300,000 excavated, but not an Area 1 can be seen. Why not? They've been whisked away to the Smithsonian. There is something there they don't want us to see. Again, the 33rd degree parallel line. This is something I highly suggest, because I don't have a lot of time to go into it today, but it's something I highly suggest you all look into because it plays very, very much into this, especially with the idea of these pre-flood, pre-Atlantean cities such as the Rockwall being built on the 33rd degree parallel line, and then civilizations about 7,000 years. But 7,000 years ago was when the floodwaters, after the flood started to recede, and we started to see civilizations rising again. This is the eye and the hand motif that's found at Moundville. I didn't mention earlier, the soil analysis that was done on the rock wall shows that the rock wall was covered. It was exposed between 20,000 and 200,000 plus years ago is when it was exposed to the air. But in about 12 to 13,000 years ago, there was a catastrophic event in the area of the Gulf of Mexico, which pushed all of this overburden and materials up over the wall and compacted it in a catastrophic event very quickly. This is why when they were doing excavations, they were finding shark's teeth embedded into the wall, and they were also finding sand dollars, rackadil, that were buried under this compacted seawater that had been, the reason it was preserved, it was packed so quickly, and it's such a catastrophic event that it preserved it and sealed it down. Now, if this had been millions of years old, they would have been petrified by then. And some people have asked me to clarify this, what I mean by the fresh meat and the sand dollars. And what I mean by that is, when John Lindsay cracked these things open, the meat inside of the sand dollars was as fresh as it would be if you went down to Galveston here right now and got some and cracked them open. How is that possible in a structure this old? It's because the catastrophic nature of the covering of this rock wall happened so quickly that the salt water preserved this stuff in situ down under the ground all this time. And because no one's dug down there and exposed it or anything, it's been preserved. Here you have the hand constellation, the M42 portal. This is what Moundville is aligned to. It's also what Chaco Canyon is aligned to. Again, these are sophisticated alignments that really have to deal with the idea that at certain times of the year, specifically from November until April, this M42 portal opens up and supposedly allows people at these sites to walk through a portal that will then transport them to this particular star system. So the idea being that whoever originally did this came through on this same portal and then allowed their followers who constructed these sites for them to go back. Because again, we find more and more that the people who built these things eventually just disappeared without a trace. The Rockwall foundation stones, that's the Denham portal again. The Rockwall foundation stones were actually found to have been constructed originally when they were built. They were built in 3.5 feet of seawater. So it's believed that that's one of the functions that the rock wall itself served, was not just as a structure or not just as possibly a launching pad, but it was also constructed as a seawall, because the water up at that time came right up to where the area of Rockwall is, and this catastrophic event being a meteorite, that's what they believe it is, that caused the Younger Dryas period, which was a mini ice age. And this is Chaco Canyon. As I described, this is something they call the observatory. Up until a few years ago, this was accessible to the public, and now it's off limits. This observatory, you can scale, you can go all the way up, and there's chambers and stuff inside of there. And at the very top of it, there is a very similar to the eye in the hand portal spiral Stargate thing that we saw there, that's depicted at sites the East Coast, West Coast. And to be clear about this, according to the Smithsonian Institution, who has a die-hard isolationist viewpoint, the idea that a culture or a society that was in New Mexico, and a society or a culture that was in Alabama, being able to have any sort of similarities at all is absolutely impossible, because by their definition, cultures that were on the opposite sides of the Mississippi River from each other couldn't have had contact with each other, which we know is just a complete falsehood. But inside of this structure called the observatory, and many of you have probably seen this, I've seen this megalith many times. They always use it on promotional materials for the state of New Mexico, but never knew that it was located in Chaco Canyon, and certainly didn't know that it was an ancient observatory. And one of the things you can kind of see in the picture there, that you could definitely see when you were there, was that somebody formed that thing. Someone cut that out of stone and built that for a specific purpose. And when you scale all the way up to the top, there is one of these spiral petroglyphs, like we saw earlier, located at the top of it. And every time you have an equinox sunrise and an equinox sunset, and a solstice sunrise and a solstice sunset, there is a light beam from the sun at those particular points that comes down perfectly through a shaft at the top of this observatory and creates a flaming dagger in the middle of this spiral Stargate rock petroglyph that's inside of that site. Now, earlier we were talking about the boreholes found in some of these stones at the various sites, and we were also talking about the iron rings that were found. Now, this is why I originally wanted to go. I originally wanted to go here because for a variety of reasons. Number one, it appeared to me that some of the stacking of the stones looked very similar to what I had seen at Rockwall, so that had my interest piqued. And I'd also heard, I guess, from different shows and different radio shows, different varieties and stuff. I'd heard a lot of people say they believed that Chaco Canyon was built by extraterrestrials. And before I went there, I really just didn't know why. I was like, why? Because there's sophisticated astrological stuff. I mean, yeah, I guess that's possible, but it doesn't necessarily mean extraterrestrials built it just because there's a lot of astronomical alignments. But we'll take a short break. Anyway, back on I'd heard that this was somehow built by extraterrestrials, and I just didn't get that. And then when I went here, I noticed that all of the doors, they're all about this big. who the hell is going to fit through that? And I started, thinking in my mind, oh, little gray aliens or something there. I mean, it was just like little children. But here's an example. This is Chaco Canyon. There you see, there are the iron rings found in the stones at Chaco Canyon, which mirror the iron rings found in the rock wall identically. So that was highly fascinating for me. I as soon as, after we got out there, I went, oh my gosh, I just didn't get it until I went there. And a lot of these sites are that way. It's all well and fine to see the pictures of it, so you really have to go to these places and check them out for yourself. If you get a chance to ever go to any of these sites, I really highly suggest it, because there's some kind of truth that occurs. There's some sort of knowledge transfer that occurs when you go there to these sites on your own and check them out and examine it. Here, this was something that blew me away because I didn't actually see this. My friend Summer had my camera and she was going around taking pictures. I didn't actually see this until I got home. Was completely blown away that here again, not only do we have the iron rings that were found on the Rockwall, but we have these boreholes as well. And I asked the park ranger in front of the desk about these, not the holes, but about the iron rings. And he said they didn't have any explanation as to what those iron rings were for. But these boreholes, again, appeared just as they appeared in the Llano uplift and just as they appeared at Rockwall. This was a very clear indicator to me that whoever was doing this structural engineering had been involved in the structural engineering of both of these sites. And again, with a lot of the astronomical alignments that occurred, there's another close-up of one, all the way across the board of these sites, it definitely gave us an indicator that even if they weren't the same people that constructed it, they were people who were operating and working from essentially the same playbook and essentially the same motive of building. This is located in Newark, Ohio, at a site called the Newark Earthworks. And this thing, to me, when I just saw, I don't know, I mean, it just looks like the Starship Enterprise to me. Look at that. I mean, that's really what it does. And what's interesting, and again, you have very sophisticated astronomical alignments that are built into the earthworks themselves. These correspond to the rising and the setting of the moon. The ones going this way determine the sun, but for this to have sun and moon correlations, that's something that's very rare, and the Chaco Canyon has it as well. This is, of course, the Serpent Mound in Ohio. That's another site I hope to go to as well. There's a lot of correlations between the Serpent Mound and Rockwall that I found, specifically the fact that you have this high-level magnetism found at the Serpent Mound, and you also have the fact that it was built on top of an ancient meteorite crater that contains high levels of an element called iridium. And iridium is being sought after by many governments in the world right now in high levels because there's supposedly a new sustainable energy system that they're trying to develop from iridium. And so the Serpent Mound has the same alignments. It's actually aligned to Cygnus, and it's also aligned to Draconis, and it has the astronomical alignments to the solstices, the equinoxes, the sunrise and sunset, and all sorts of other very, very interesting things. There's a giant megalith near it. But what really got me was the stonework around it. It did look like some of the stonework that we had seen in the area. But going back to the Rockwall now, I also wanted to find out if there were any other things like this or strange things found in and around Dallas. And of course, Dallas being on the 33rd degree parallel, I just figured there had to be something else here. In the late 1800s, the Dallas Morning News ran an article about these triangular-shaped stones that were found near Browder Springs, which is currently in downtown Dallas. They found these triangular-shaped plates. When they struck them with a pickaxe, they rang like a bell and produced a frequency. They had strange Phoenician letters on them, which here have been translated from the Phoenician letters to the regular counterparts. And they had the skull and bones, the all-seeing eye, and the various letters. These were found at the level of soil where they were pulling mastodon bones out of. So obviously, whoever created this, these were thousands and thousands of years old. And because of there was a natural spring, a limestone spring in the area, which I can never figure out why they did this. Why would you, if you had a natural lime spring, why would you build a sewer into it? It made no sense, but that's what they did. The site where these were found are very close. Has anybody in here ever been to Dallas before?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you guys familiar with the farmers market in Dallas, the Dallas
Yep.
Farmers Market? Okay, these were found right near the Dallas Farmers Market. Right near there is the Dallas Scottish Rite Masonic Cathedral. I think we have a picture coming up with that. I've tried getting into this cathedral many times. They've allowed me access to a lot of other Masonic lodges before, but they've not allowed me into this. That's one of the key things. You'll see this in the film as well, is that the Masonic interest in the Rockwall, and the Masonic interest in a lot of these things in general, is very high. Now, this is the Dallas Scottish Rite Cathedral. You drive by this place at night, it's just creepy as hell. I mean, it's just, just creepy out. But the interesting thing is you can walk around the perimeter of it. You can kind of see it there, but not very much. But you see that grass there. It's set on an elevation that almost looks as if it was set on a mound. And really, you're talking about maybe 300, 400 feet most, being where these triangular plates were located at. They've got all kinds of crazy stuff in there. They've got a bust of a pike. They've got a bowling alley. And the crazy thing is, too, it's got a basement, which most buildings in Texas, we don't have basements here. But there, they have a basement. But they also have it was built in the 1930s. It's the only one of its kind. They have a lamp inside of this building that displays star charts on the ceiling with specific astronomical alignments into it. And I also found reports that when they first started building the sewer systems in downtown Dallas, they found laser-etched tunnels under the city of Dallas that had been there for long periods of time. This was actually some sites found in ancient Babylon. And you can see here that some of the stonework of these ancient Babylonian temples very much resembles, especially here on the bottom, the stonework seen in Chaco Canyon and also seen at Rockwall. And there, again, there's the other example of that. We started getting into trying to figure out, exactly who these builders were and the precedent for this. And going back throughout history, these gods or these extraterrestrial beings that came to Earth, that is the ziggurat at Ur, and currently now what is Iraq. That's one of the sites that's been taken over by the U.S. military. And interestingly enough, most people don't know this. In 2003, during the invasion of Iraq, the first thing that we did was Special Forces went into the Iraq National Museum and blew the doors off with C4 and went straight to the vaults. And so all of the cuneiform tablets and cylinder seals pertaining specifically to the periods of Iraq, which were at that time supposedly under rule of these by these Anunnaki gods. And of course, we see here the same type of stonework, very similar to the rock wall there. But in all of these cases, the gods themselves were not ever said to be the ones doing the actual construction. Humans were the ones doing the actual construction, but they were working from basically construction manuals that were divined to them or given to them by the gods. And when you look into Sumerian gods, Egyptian gods, one of the things that, I guess it's kind of common knowledge for people who study it. Wasn't common knowledge for me, and it was very, very telling, was the fact that these gods are always, when you think of gods or you think of the type, you think of, omnipotent, you don't really think of them being structural engineers and scientists, but so many of them, specifically in Egypt and ancient Sumeria, were described in many cases as being structural engineers. That was what their forte was. And so that got me into really starting to cross-reference a lot of the artifacts and whatnot that have been found in the United States with ancient Mesopotamian artifacts and a lot of the stories there. And it's mind-blowing when you do it, because until you cross-reference a lot of the stuff that's been found in the United States against Mesopotamian stuff, and as a scientist, why would you? Why would a scientist ever do that? There's no reason for them to, because as far as they're told, there certainly should be no connection between these structures and structure we find today. But when they had the invasion there in 2003, again, they went straight to the location of these Babylonian and cuneiform cylinder seals that relate to these dynasties that had these buildings that were constructed by the divine instruction of the gods. Sometimes they were transmuted to gods like with the name of Enki. Sometimes they were later on Quetzalcoatl, we also know as the same person. Now these pillars here, one of the reports that came out of Rockwall during some of these subterranean explorations that happened around the area described two large black marble pillars found underneath Rockwall that they described as shining like something out of the Orient. Now, this description also fits the description throughout ancient texts of these two pillars. They have different names depending on what time period that we're talking about. Some places they're called the Pillars of Hercules. Some time periods they're called the Pillars of Enoch. Now, specifically, Enoch was a pre-flood patriarch. Those of you who are probably familiar with Enoch know the stories of him, going up into the heavens in a spaceship and all this. Enoch, who disappeared supposedly because he went up to the heavens, actually came back under the guise later, after the flood, of Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice born. That's what that essentially is why you have these different gods in Sumeria. Enki, who later would become various other god names. You had Marduk, Enlil, who later became Marduk. You had cults that rose up around that. Marduk later became Ra in the Egyptian pantheon. But these pillars, originally called the Pillars of Enoch, constructed prior to the flood, were said to have had all the instructions that mankind was supposed to follow on Earth. So when I started to see the reports that something like this was found under Rockwall, immediately it sent off red flags for me. And it's interesting that when Enoch, I just found this out this past week, when Enoch was meeting with these gods before he went up into the heavens, the description of the room that Enoch entered into mind-blowingly sounds very close to the rock wall. He specifically talked about tile floors made of crystalline structures. He talked about everything being made out of crystals and various different types of those things brought together. And again, the fact that these black marble pillars have never been found anywhere on Earth, but they're found here in Rockwall, is a very, very significant thing. Rockwall being on the 33rd degree parallel. This is an obelisk that's in Dealey Plaza in Dallas, and it has 13 pillars, 13 sections. Very important. It has an eternal flame on top, put there before the Kennedy assassination. We went out to Dealey Plaza during the solstice. This is the street grid viewed from the air of Dealey Plaza, and you'll see it's a perfect pyramid, but the pyramid is not capped. But right across Interstate 35 right there, you have the Trinity River, the Trinity being the capstone of the pyramid. Coincidentally enough, when you go out to the grassy knoll, it becomes very apparent when you're thinking about it under these terms, if you look at it. This site at some point was a mound. There's no question. That's what the grassy knoll is. It's a mound. And the book depository building, where supposedly the shooting happened, that building, actually the site where that building was at, was actually, there's a plaque there in Dealey Plaza that says it was the site of the first fraternal lodge in Texas. And when you go and research that, you find out it wasn't just a fraternal lodge, as they call it in the plaque. It was actually the site of the first ever Masonic lodge ever in the entire state of Texas, constructed right there. And again, being on the 33rd degree parallel, and you see the importance of that, it's very interesting. Going back to the picture we talked about earlier when we saw the ziggurat there in Iraq, that area of what we now know as Iraq, prior to being called Sumeria, was originally called Sidonia. And it's on the 33rd degree parallel as well. There's also a location on the planet Mars called Cydonia. And the location on planet Mars called Cydonia has pyramids, ziggurats, and the supposed face on Mars, which Mesopotamian texts describe explicitly. Now, we didn't know about this. It's been written off as shadows and everything else. Now, the people who say the face on Mars isn't real, I have one question for them. How do you explain thousands of year-old texts from Mesopotamia that describe these Anunnaki having a way station on Earth and describe explicitly these Agigi workers being on Mars, one of them passing away and them etching into the rock his face so he would be immortalized forever? So you have Cydonia on Mars, 33rd degree parallel. You have Iraq, which they call the cradle of civilization, because in Babylon, this is where civilization first pulled itself back out of the muck 7,000 years ago after the flood. This is also when you started to have the rise of the Canaanite, Phoenician, Amorite bloodlines, who were also said to be giants that existed in those ancient lands. Now, the fact that the Rockwall's pre-flood, built on the 33rd degree parallel, we know beyond any shadow of a doubt from the soil analysis that it was pre-flood. That's, of course, Thoth, who had said to transmit a lot of the engineering skills to different people like Gudea, who we talked about extensively in the film, in ancient Sumeria at that time. And so when we found out that the rock wall was exposed and open between 20,000 and 200,000 plus years ago, and then we look at the fact that it's on the 33rd degree parallel, we start to understand from reading the ancient text. 7,000 years ago, you had the first messianic deity, the proto-Jesus, was this character right here, Oannes. And Oannes showed up in Babylon 7,000 years ago, right after the floodwaters started to recede. Now, the people who had survived the flood at that time were very ogreish. They had everything had been wiped out after the flood. So a lot of the people were primitive. They had no knowledge of growing crops. They had no knowledge of anything. And so you had this character Oannes, and the ancient text described some of these Atlantean serpent priests fleeing the destruction of Atlantis in specialized suits, fish suits, that allowed them to exist and live underwater until such time as the floodwaters receded. And when that happened, lo and behold, these rulers popped back up in Babylon on the 33rd degree parallel. So the idea that the rock wall is one of these pre-flood cities becomes very, very likely, especially in light of the fact that all of a sudden, here we go yet again, floodwaters recede, 33rd degree parallel, smack dab on it, civilization starts to rise literally overnight right out of that area. And it's not contested, even in mainstream academia, that the Sumerians literally had culture overnight. They got it right in one try. They had sophisticated sewer systems, they had sophisticated agriculture, and it had to have come from somewhere. It didn't just come out of the clear blue sky. And so Oannes, this is the reason why you see the Pope to this day having a hat that looks like a fish hat. That's why, because Oannes was the original Jesus, but they don't want to get into discuss that, but it's in the film. Sir Francis Bacon wrote his book, The New Atlantis. It's definitely a very interesting read. Sir Francis Bacon is the guy who brought the Rosicrucians and brought the secret societies to America during colonial times. He describes in his book Flying Machine how the New Atlantis would be built in the New World, America, on the ashes of the old Atlantis that once existed. He talks about flying machines, skyscrapers being here, all the stuff that eventually came to this world. He describes in this book, written long before any of this was happened. The one thing that he explicitly described in there was that at some point, the New Atlantis, America, would reach a point where they would have to make a decision whether or not they would want power for the sake of more power, or whether or not they wanted power to do service for the rest of the world. And I find it very interesting that it seems now we're finding ourselves on the brink of that same decision. Now, this is what I mentioned earlier in the presentation. This is a coin. It was found in a well in Illinois at a soil strata that dates to 220,000 years. This coin was in the possession of the Smithsonian Institution for a period of time until Rockwall researchers requested pictures and photos of it. They said, oh yeah, come on out, come out and get some pictures. And so when one of the guys went out to get some pictures of it, he flew all the way out to go to the Smithsonian. He gets there and he says, oh, we're sorry. We don't know where it's at. We lost it. Oops. But the hieroglyphs, what really made this interesting is that the hieroglyphs on this coin represent the same exact hieroglyphs that are found on the 2.5-ton garnet stone that was found in Rockwall, which is now in the possession of Congressman Ralph Hall. And it's very interesting that Congressman Ralph Hall is the oldest living congressman ever. And his family goes back to the very beginning of Rockwall. They were the first bankers in Rockwall. In fact, his office, if you go to the Rockwall, the little effigy they have at the old courthouse, you can stand by it, and directly right across where that little effigy is Ralph Hall's office, and right next to there is the Hall Bank building, which was his family's building. So it becomes very, very apparent why he wanted this stone. Now, this being found in a soil strata of 220,000 years puts us right in the same target area, especially with the matching hieroglyphs, as the rock wall, because the rock wall, based on the stone analysis, the paleomagnetic data, puts it somewhere in the range of 20 to 200,000 years old. So here we have a Columbia-looking figure. Columbia was also known as Queen Semiramis. That's what the Statue of Liberty is modeled after. And to see a sort of a pre-flood depiction of this, and there's also another side of it. It looks like a mushroom or something here. Very, very interesting depiction. It's being slow. Okay, there we go. That's what I was looking for. So that's the Sanders stone. Finally, we got a picture of it in here. That is the 2.5. That's the 2.5-ton garnet stone that was found in Rockwall that Rockwall supposedly now has. This black that you see is where they put soil in it so you can further identify it. And like I said, this was in the courthouse for many, many years. A 2.5-ton slab. And there was also the Temple of Canute in Egypt also has very similar hieroglyphs to this. I then learned about an artifact that for a while was in the possession of the banker J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan was responsible for stealing all of Nikola Tesla's advanced energy technology and shelving it. He had this artifact. When you think about him shelving technology as it being a threat to his bottom line, this artifact, which now is in a museum in Oxford, England, is called the Sumerian King List. It looks big here, but actually the actual artifact's about that big. But what this details, this to me is really the smoking gun. It details a 432,000 year reign pre-flood. It specifically talks about this reign being pre-flood. A 432,000 year pre-flood reign by these gods, 10 of them, over 6 cities throughout the earth. And so this is a record of those cities. Now, it explicitly talks about the 6 cities that the 10 rulers ruled over being constructed, ladies and gentlemen, right at about 200,000 years ago. I don't know about you, but that just sounds like too big of a coincidence to just be simply a coincidence. We have the coin, we have the 2.5-ton garnet stone, both of these dating in the 220,000 year range, and then we have a smoking gun artifact which explicitly talks about these cities being constructed right at about 200,000 years ago. And the other fascinating thing again is the destruction of these cities happening, 33rd degree parallel, floodwaters recede, and then they're right back there in Babylon, setting up and reseeding society after the destruction there again. This is the area of Sidon, Mount Bel Hermon, 33rd degree parallel. This is where these Amorites came from. And the Amorites seem to have been the leftover remnant of giants that survived the flood. They inhabited what is now Palestine for years. There's a better picture. You can see the entire rock wall. Now let me pause this. Again, the Amorites who inhabited Palestine ran out after the exodus of the Jews. In the ancient text, it talks about how they fled to their copper mines in the west. And that's all it says. And in Michigan, there are there's tons and tons of evidence of mining operations, of copper going on thousands of years, and they found artifacts made from the copper that came from these Michigan mines. They found them in ancient Iraq. They found them all over the world. They found them in mounds in Alabama. They found them in Caddo mounds in East Texas, all over the place. But this, the 32nd problem you listed, Pythagorean theorem, see the square and the triangle part there? I mean, the mathematics of that alone. You also have the golden ratio in the wall. That section you see there, you can see the pink on the left. That's Lake Ray Hubbard. So everything you see on that side right there is what is now exists underwater. There's Interstate 30. You can see how Interstate 30 runs right directly through it. I've located several spots on the wall. I've located a spot down here on this corner, on this farm that's identified here by John Lindsay. I found that. I think I'm just going to go knock on their door and say, hey, you mind if I come here and stuff? We'll see what happens. But we're right now, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to obtain property so we can have our own archaeological dig. We want to be able to have we have lots of volunteers that want to help. We just have to try and find the money to be able to have a location. We're also trying to fund volume 2 of the film so we can further explore this. But with the excavation, what the problem is that there have not been enough excavations up to this point that have been done on multiple sites. The History Channel show America Unearthed with Scott Walter, who claims to be a forensic geologist, who, by the way, the college that he attended for some reason has no record of him ever going there. I think it's odd. You can contact them, they'll tell you. They have no record of this guy ever going there or ever getting a degree there, but yet he has a degree. And the granddaughter of James Glenn, who I talked about earlier, she contacted me right after my film came out earlier this year, and she said that after the first episode of that show aired last year, they had a tip line, and they asked people to send in things for them to investigate. And she sent them all kinds of Rockwall stuff, contact, and they wanted nothing to do with it. And about 2 weeks after my film came out, she contacted me and said, hey, I thought you might want to know. The History Channel was not interested in my information at all. They didn't want it. And then 2 weeks after your film comes out, lo and behold, they're blowing my phone up. They're leaving me messages. They're freaking out and wanting my stuff. And this didn't happen until after your movie came out. I thought you might want to know that. And lo and behold, it was announced in May that they were going to be coming to Rockwall to do a dig. And they said it was going to be the end-all, be-all on the wall, and that they were going to be there for a week. And I went, the end-all, be-all in a week? John Lindsay talked about it taking 6 to 7 months to break through the blue shale alone to get to where the wall was at. So that didn't make sense to me. And then I kept finding scan information. Well, come to find out, May 18th, I was on Coast to Coast AM for the first time, and that was a big accomplishment for me. Well, lo and behold, I found out later, on May 18th, they had a public viewing of the wall where you could go to downtown Rockwall and pay $10, and they would take you out to the site where the History Channel was doing their dig. And to make a long story short, I found out they didn't actually, this explains the weak thing, they actually didn't do any new analysis or any new excavations at all. They went to the old site that they had excavated, we showed you pictures of earlier, in 99 and 2000. They pulled all the dirt off the old site, set up their cameras, filmed it, and that was it. And they're also using the old Texas A&M information that totally whitewashes the whole thing. So when you guys see that in November, you'll have a better idea of what's true and what isn't. But let's see if we have time for some questions. Anybody any questions? Back there, Zach.
You think now, a lot of people say that we go to war and oil and resources. My opinion, I kind of share your opinion. I think it's more of a quickly that we're going Libya. Do you think it's more antiquities that they're after now than anything?
Oh, absolutely, and that's not just my opinion. That's I've actually been told that from people who've been in special forces and over there who've seen things destroyed and destructed. In fact, one of the mines, it's very interesting. There's a mine called the Cashapp mine in Afghanistan, and it's on the 33rd degree parallel. And I actually think this either this piece or this piece of tourmaline here came from that mine, and a lot of the materials used in the rock wall are found there in that location in Afghanistan. They also have tons of rare earth metals, as I mentioned earlier today. But yes, if you look at where the wars have been launched, and you look at what countries were told are the threat, those happen to be countries where there are significant archaeological things found. I remember a couple of years ago I found out that they supposedly had found the Palace of Sheba in Yemen, where the Ark of the Covenant was supposedly located, and I said, yeah, Yemen will be the next boogeyman, watch. And a couple of years later, they had the underwear bomber guy that they tried to sell us, which is completely ridiculous, and that's where they said he was from Yemen, and we had airstrikes by Obama there in 2009. And then, of course, we know Iran has been a big target for antiquities acquisition, and if you look into Iran, there's a thing called the Behistun inscription there, inscribed by King Darius. It's absolutely a fact that the antiquities acquisition is the real reason behind wars. And so many of these artifacts and stuff, I guess people have gotten conscious about some of it and really started to feel bad, or thought maybe they were going to be cursed, because a big bag of these Sumerian cylinder seals and clay tablets was found by the side of the road by an Air Force base in North Carolina. These were ones that specifically came from the Iraq National Museum during the invasion of 2003. I guess somebody felt bad and just dumped them there. But yeah, absolutely, it definitely is about antiquities acquisition. Anybody else?
What do you know about unearthing the Gilgamesh?
Are you talking about the
grave?
tomb of Gilgamesh?
Supposedly, yeah.
Yeah, that's something they've been trying to do. That, I don't really know a lot about that specific one, but what got me about it is, and I think this might be very telling to a lot of people who aren't aware of some of this stuff. I mean, to read and to go into research and find out, you hear about these Anunnaki people, but when you go and you look at the archaeological evidence and you find out that they actually have found Anunnaki tombs, and they've actually excavated them, and they have one of the bodies of one of these Anunnaki people in a museum in London that no one's ever been allowed to do DNA analysis on, ever. You find the fact that they were buried with all of these. One of the cultural things was they believed that, they, just like the Egyptians, they would bury them with their slaves and their workers and everything else, because they didn't think that death was the end. They thought that it was just the beginning of going on to something else. So you would constantly see that. But yeah, just the story of Gilgamesh alone is just amazing, and I think would be a great science fiction movie. I think they may have to do that down the road.
Did you ever, when you were in any of these sites, did you ever take a compass with you and see if there was any compass movements?
Yes. I do know that when you get close to the Rockwall, you can't take a phone or a laptop or anything else real close to the Rockwall, because they'll burn up. A compass, if close to the Rockwall, will just spin and just burn up. Same thing at the Serpent Mound as well. If you take any electronic equipment of certain kinds near that compass, yeah, a lot of them will do that, and that has to do with the high-level magnetism. And the magnetism of these things, it's electromagnetism. It's very different than magnetism where you have iron filings and you have a magnet to it. It won't do that. It's a magnetic field that's highly charged by some energy force that's unknown to us.
Could you feel like electricity, like,
Yes.
on
You
the
can-
back of your neck kind of
Yeah,
thing?
when you go, that's the thing in a lot of these sites. When you go to a lot of these sites, you can feel the energy of the Chaco Canyon. You can feel the energy there. I haven't gone to Serpent Mound yet, but I've heard that it's that way. Also, the Cahokia Mounds in Illinois, I've heard, is that way. Another site we went to was in Arkansas, the Toltec Mounds, which are huge mounds in Arkansas, which are they're considered the most paranormal place in all of the state of Arkansas. And yeah, when you go there, you feel you feel like people are watching you. It's very strange. A lot of these sites do have their own specific energies to them, and it's something that you can't really, I can't really explain it to you and get you to believe me. It's something you really have to go there and experience for yourself. Anybody else?
on the rock wall, what is the depth for the top of the wall throughout the whole perimeter?
Well, the top,
Does it vary any greatly?
a little bit. It depends on how much dirt's been pulled off the top. I mean, it's from what I understand. I mean, the map I showed you earlier. I mean, John Lindsay said he went around with, a metal rod, and he just walked this thing at night, banging the rod on top of it. And he said that what was interesting is that part of it was covered up, but he could see some of it that wasn't. And he said the parts that weren't covered up, when the moon hit it, it just glowed. And so the depth from the top of it, yeah, it varies. Sometimes it's 3 feet, 2 feet, but top to bottom, top to the very bottom down, you're looking at just shy of about 100 feet. Next. Pam? But the size, they're about, they're roughly 2 to 3 inches in diameter and about 3 to 4 inches deep. Something like that. And I think all the ones from a lot of the other boreholes were approximately about that same size and depth. So that was the thing. That was the only reason I even, zeroed in on that, because the depths and everything looked like they were about the same. Okay.
One is, you mentioned a few times about the wealth of the county. Have you made any connections with the Rockwall and the wealth? Did one come before the other or because of each other?
Yeah, well, I don't think initially that the wealth had anything to do with it, but the part that I showed, let me back up and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Right here on the map that I have, this area right here. This is the Interstate 30 runs through Rockwall. This is the submerged area here, right here along the shore, where this is submerged. This is Highway 66 that runs real close to the old courthouse. From the 66 bridge here all the way to 30, all these houses that are along that line are all, there are houses over there that are worth in excess of $10 million. They're gated communities. The biggest, richest houses in Rockwall area exist over there. And I had a listener who came from Tennessee and visited family there, and she stayed there for a week, and she told me that in their house, she just felt an energy. She felt something purifying. She said her and her husband were bickering and arguing the whole time on the trip. When they got there, they were calm. And as I mentioned about Congressman Ralph Hall, this guy's the oldest living sitting congressman, and there's been a lot of talk that a lot of this, the energy fields of these particular stones, because of their makeup, may have some sort of rejuvenating effect. What was your other question?
The scientist or the archaeologist, he said that he came to some findings that he won't reveal till he dies. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? I know you said it had to do with the magnetic fields were different.
Sure. The thing is, we don't really know. We don't know all of what he found. All we know is that he was brought in strictly to do a paleomagnetic survey, which has to do with dating. The reason it has to do with dating is that when you dig deeper down, the Earth has gone through pole shifts. The Earth has gone through different cataclysms. But within the certain types of rock, the rock always records magnetically when these pole shifts happen. So when you go and you do a paleomagnetic survey, you can determine when these structures were built, based on the magnetic data from the pole shift that it shows. Something in the magnetism, something either in the age or in the way that the magnetism reacted, we don't really know for sure, it literally scared the crap out of him. And the thing is, they paid this guy something like $30,000 to come out and do this survey. And again, it scared him so bad, he won't talk about it. He won't tell anybody what it is, but what I'm planning on doing, what I want to do once we are able to get our own dig going, is I want to be able to, again, have another independent paleomagnetic survey done and have all of the analysis and everything, videoed, on tape, so we can find out for sure, hey, because I want to bring somebody out and say, okay, look, can you tell me what you find here that would cause it to scare the crap out of somebody? But really, we don't have that much data on it, but if we do, it'll definitely be interesting. So,
if it's so earth-shattering, frightful to this man that he wouldn't allow it to be divulged until after his death, where would that put you to go and buy property, have your own paleontology
That's
thing
on-
done? I mean, would you have fear maybe for
No.
your own?
No, because I mean, I've already put myself out there. I've had Blackwater guys dressed as state troopers kick my door down before. I mean, I've had all kinds of manner stuff. So I'm not worried about that. It doesn't scare me. But really, more than anything, I think with Dr. Wolf Goss, I don't think it was a fear for his life thing, from what I understand. It was more of a fear of his career. And if you look at his status at the time versus what his status is now, it's something high level in the college. He has basically climbed the ladder of the college since this occurred,
Sure.
and I think that that's what he was worried about. I think that he was worried about being laughed at, because a lot of this stuff, a lot of these lost secrets, when academics bring it up to their peers, some of them, they get laughed out of their jobs. It's just the way it is.
Some get whacked too.
That's true. That's true. What else? Anybody else? Right there, Bill, sir?
How much of the world is actually exposed now?
Very little. Very little. Most of what you see, you can only see now is that concrete stuff that I passed around with the shells in it. Very little of it's exposed. Now, there are no sites where you can go out and actually view it. And again, that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to get my own dig done, so that groups like this and stuff, we can coordinate and have people come out and view it themselves. I just think it's something that we all deserve to know about and have a right to see.
So it's all on private property?
Well, no, it's not all of it's on private property. I mean, there like I said, there are some spots. I found a site in Rockwall that has 2 mounds and part of the rock wall on it. It's right in about this area, and it's zoned for commercial use. They want $675,000 for this property. But if somebody buys it and puts a building on it, you're never going to know. But if someone had that piece of property to do an excavation on, it would be huge. And so a lot of this stuff that blows me away. We just got really accurate mapping where we can see in Google Earth where this stuff's actually located at, and it was mind-blowing for me to see. I mean, we know that they've built on a lot of it, and I kind of focused in on that for a lot of years, that okay, they're building all these structures on it to keep it covered up. But what really shocked me was the fact that they really have taken great care in a lot of places to not build on it. There are areas in Rockwall where you see houses, buildings, and then just a line of trees or a little patch of forest for no good reason. And when we got the accurate mapping, we started noticing that these little patches of trees and these little forested areas that are just cut out right in the middle of neighborhoods are actually spots where part of the wall runs through it. So yes, while there has been a great effort, I think, to keep it covered up, obviously somebody as well is trying to keep it, restored, I guess, for whatever reason.
Through research, all these different stories, paper all of them came across giants in the travel and documents. Why do you think and giants are easy to prove? It's not a hard thing to not prove to someone because it's there. Why do you think it's been such a threat the history of giants? Why it's not this whole isolationism versus fusionism policy hasn't just gone by the wayside?
That's going to take long for me to answer, and we have time here. But the long and the short of it is really is the fact that, like we talked about earlier when we were outside, Meriwether Lewis from the Lewis and Clark expedition. There's a lot of controversy surrounding his death. They say that he committed suicide, but it's very shady. It's obviously that he was murdered. But one of the things that he wrote explicitly about was them finding giants across the United States. And these were not allowed to come out. There are big, huge gaps in his field reports that we don't know what happened to. But one of them explicitly talks about, he's very, very fearful talking about this, that they found giants scattered all throughout the United States that had been shackled down with copper restraints by someone. And he specifically talked about, he said, someone in the future is going to unleash a plague of giants upon the earth that will bring a destruction to mankind, the likes of which has never been seen. In my opinion, I think that the powers that be know about this. They know where some of these are still alive and shackled down at, and they may be planning to do this at some point. I think that's why Meriwether Lewis was killed, and I think that's why parts of his journals talking about that were suppressed. Anybody else?
Talked about the radio and stuff they're looking for now. What do they plan on using it for?
Two things, from what I understand. You can do some research on this on your own if you look it up. Two things. One is to make some sort of sustainable fuel source, and also to make some sort of high energy propulsion systems that would make interstellar space travel possible.
You said uranium is only here because the meteor.
It comes from meteorites. Yeah, that's the interesting thing about Haiti. You know, Haiti had the big earthquake a few years ago, and it wiped out their government completely. So they've had no regulation there. Haiti has the most significant gold and iridium deposits found anywhere on Earth, and their countries now are going in there, you know, without any regulation and just exploiting it to no end. So yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it. Anybody else? All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming out. And oh, we got one question.
Do you use a Geiger counter when you go out to these places?
Not always. No, not always. I don't, because there's not really any reason to, because there's really not a lot of radioactive stuff. Yeah. But I just want to say real quick before everybody sits out, if you want to get a DVD or a Blu-ray or whatever, you want to get it signed, I'll be back here after we're done. And all my work, I don't have any outside funding from universities. I'm strictly an individual. So if you'd like to make a contribution to our work back here, we accept Visa card, MasterCards, cash, whatever you want. You can do that right here. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.